and specifically what young people and the youth movement are doing around this and how we can better support them and help address the challenges. By way of introduction, everybody, Nishad is an environmentalist, he's a speaker, he's a policy-oriented social change advocate. He's best known for his work on environmental and climate change education, advocacy, and policy in the Gulf region. Nishad is the founder of Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar. He's on the steering committee of various organizations, amazing organizations like UNESCO, Youth Climate Action Network. He's also the regional facilitator at UNEP for the Middle East. His work has included mainstreaming climate change issues, youth advocacy, and grassroots work in Qatar. And now he's here speaking to us. So we're very lucky. Ishad, why don't we jump in? Why don't you let us know how has the youth voice and youth activism impacted and grown the climate movement in the MENA region?
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you for having me here, and thanks to all of the listeners here. Myself, Nishad, I've been the co-founder of the Arab Youth Climate Movement and also Arab Youth for COP recently since last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. So, jumping into the point on youth advocacy and activism is pretty much in a nascent stage. They're just beginning, like any other tech or many other issues we see from the region. We are the last one to jump into the bus, and the young people are not very far from that. We see young people are just getting into that. I mean, I should say it's in a very nascent stage. They started to understand the power of activism, but the region is not new to. But especially on climate and environment, it's for the first time they're getting a chance to make their voices heard and to get what they really aspire from their leaders in their countries. They're basically working on to really make sure they are part of the conversation within their country, within the region, and globally. So, in a larger context, young people in the region realize they've got the power to talk about climate change. They've been addressing many other issues in the past, and they've been incredibly doing that. But climate change is new, if you look at it in the political angle, but academically well covered in the many past and many of the journals and stuff like that has been still continuing. But looking at it from a civil society point of view, young people were in the part of this conversation, and civil society is also very huge in the region. Nevertheless, Gulf countries minus rest of the Maghreb and Mashriq had a really strong civil society, but young people were in part of that to a larger extent. And what we see now is that they're coming up, they're moving up the ladder, but with a lot of difficulties. So,
I think it's me who's frozen. I think it's Nishad.
To underline the first
sorry, Nishad.
And
sorry, Nishad, we lost you. We lost you for
Rosie,
about.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We lost you for about 30 seconds there. If you just start again on your last point. And I don't know about the rest of the team, but it would be really helpful if you could move a little bit closer to the mic. We're getting you, but there's a little bit of. Give that a go. Let's see.
Is there still, you can hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
I mean, I just want to make sure others do hear me too.
Great, yes, let's give that a go.
Okay, so I mean, that brings to my, bottom line of the first question is that youth movements on climate has been growing, and it's at the very early stages. But what we need to do at this point of them is to support. And we will move into those questions, what the support will look like in the next couple of questions. So yeah, back to you, Rosie.
And you mentioned that young people are keen to be part of the conversation. Are there some things that they're currently doing to be part of the conversation?
I mean, young people are trying to be there. I mean, frankly speaking, the young people in the region didn't get that opportunity doing in the past many years when the global youth climate movement grew, our regional youth were in part of this mainstream climate change issues in their respective country or the region, especially the MENA region. What is happening now, the young people are trying to be there in that space, either part of their larger governmental delegations or part of the negotiation processes. They've been trying to be there, and it is again a bit of late starting, but they're trying to catch up. What are young people doing in this contest is trying to be there at the forefront, representing their country, making their voices heard as a first point of entry into the global climate conversation. And many of them comes to this after going through a lot of local initiatives, having worked with youth movement and youth advocacy within their country, and then taking to the next step. But what is also fascinating at the time is, given that climate change is not new, but the regional youth movement is new. Many things this is a very hippie thing to be, and we find a lot of mass of young movement of young people at the school and university moment joining, but they are not able to carry it on. You find tons of young people who have been working in a couple of years now in high school at the university level, very active in climate and their advocacy and awareness movement. Immediately when they jump into their the real world of jobs and stuff, they completely goes out of the radar. Even the commitment goes out. I mean, this is something very much seen, at least in the Gulf point of view. Many of the young people who are part of the conversation at the university level are very active, and then you find one fine day they're completely out of the radar. They feel like, okay, committed to life, move forward with life, find a job, get married, have this sort of rhetoric is very common, and the activity are very much limited to university. You will not find young people really wanted to join a civil society to make a big difference. Obviously, why? A big part is it is not aspiring, it doesn't have enough funds to look after their needs at the same time. So these are some constraints that makes young people don't see civil society for climate activism as a longer term objective, rather than very subjective at university level out of their passion for environment, which doesn't stick for long. But looking at these are some of the examples that happens in the region. If you look from a very micro angle, but if you look at the macro angle, the youth being part of climate advocacy and activism is growing in numbers. But how much substantially they are contributing, it's very limited, and very limited young people who are doing it, but also struggling to meet their needs at the same time. So the bigger picture shows that trends are showing there is a good, the curve is going up, but the impact on the ground is very limited at this point of time. Even their advocacy is not really providing any sort of substantial change at the national narrative or regional narrative.
Nishad, and it sounds like one challenge about achieving the change that you want to see is in terms of numbers, in that you have young people who are really engaged with climate, and then for various reasons that cools down, and then you have less of a movement. What other challenges have you sort of experienced as you're trying to create the change that you want to see?
I mean, biggest challenge for young people to be part of the climate movement has always been they're not being able to be represented, and how the representation happens is basically getting enough funding and capacity building. So many of the young people who are joining the climate movement, or I say the climate bandwagon, is that they are very much interested, doesn't have enough capacity to go beyond the subject. I mean, if you come to climate, their understandings are very basic. And even if you ask to some of the young people, what are the things at stake for your country, or maybe in Lebanon, Jordan, or in Qatar, or in Saudi Arabia, they're not able to prompt up. Though that's the limitation of the knowledge. This makes the people in this region take young people very lightly, because they are just making noises. They don't have anything beyond do that. So to build their capacity. And the second thing is larger role played by funding. Funding is completely nascent in this part of the region. People are really struggling. I know some of the dinosaur NGOs in the region who's been historically receiving funds and doing a wonderful job, nevertheless. But the new movement of young people who are there don't get opportunity because they don't have enough funds or support. Rosie, did I lose you?
So the new movement. Yes, I'm
Rosie,
here.
did
I
I
can
lose
hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
I can
you.
hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Great.
So
We heard that last bit, that the new movement of
yeah,
people don't have the
yeah.
funding and capacity. Continue.
Exactly. So in terms of funding, original youth has been not seen as a solution provider or the mass awareness building capacity they might possess. They feel they are not yet there, and this keeps them at bay. Many of the young organizations really have a lot of capacity in them. I wouldn't say all, but a few which are we can easily count them, really lack the funding and support. I mean, state never supports them. Some of the other organizations feel they are too young to lead such a sort of project, while their understanding and capacities are beyond any other organization in the region. And the bigger part comes is funding. Local fundings are very limited. International fundings mostly goes to the global north, who are exceptionally famous or popular in their countries, on social media, on international media's newspaper, are always covering them. And then when it comes to the region, even the funding organization looks at how famous the individual is, how big is his organization is, and does that give them more media coverage supporting them. So when it comes to MENA region, none of the organization, youth organization, does possess this. Neither we have celebrity activists like Greta or others in the region, but they are people who really do
Giving Nishad a moment for his connection to stabilize. Really interesting what he's saying about funders wanting to fund the shiny stars, which there are many that we are very grateful because they've shone a light on a lot of issues. But I think he's calling out that there are lots and lots of people doing this work day in, day out, perhaps don't have much of a social media. Let's give him a moment for this to come back. Oh, we've lost Nishad, I think. Wally, did you see him? No, we've lost him. That's okay. We'll give him a couple of minutes for him to join, and hopefully, yeah, and then hopefully he'll join and his connection will be better. But whilst we are waiting, I wonder if any of you guys who work within the MENA region and work with young people. Actually, are there any people who work with young people within the MENA region here? Or who?
What's the question again?
Are there people who work with young people in the MENA region on this call? Here we go. Okay, Rani, thank you for coming off mute and
Hi,
checking.
Rosie. Rosie, can you hear me?
Hi then. Yes, I can hear
So
you.
yeah, there's some trouble with the internet, and I apologize for that.
That's okay, Nishad. Welcome back. You were just talking about how the space is underfunded, and funders tend to sort of favor the individuals who are more well known on social media or who have a following and can get a message out there.
Yeah, well, so basically, if you look at the amount of support it gets to the global North youth movements are enormous. I mean, you just check their funding organization. There will be Google, SAP, Microsoft, what do you call other international foundations. You know, they are heavily funding them because they are very active on their social space. I mean, I am not against that, but the fact is, our young people in the region doesn't have that social space, with limited freedom of speech, limited freedom of advocacy. But the fact is that beyond making noise on social media and on the streets, they're doing some great work on the ground. I mean, I just want to quote a recent example of USAID funding they launched before COP 27 in Sharm el Sheikh last year, was they wanted to fund young youth projects led by young people. And I was one of the reviewer for the project. I was been selected as one of the senior climate expert. I mean, we got almost like 350 or 400 application with great projects on the ground. So now going to the bigger picture, 90% of them are not registered, but they're doing great voluntary works. This comes to the fact that many of the organizations doesn't have enough funds to register their association or NGOs in their respective countries. It's the big problem number one. And what is defining this is funding. And the next big question, have you handled up to $50K or $1 million in the past? The youth organization is not long established NGOs here. No, the maximum they would have handled, I know, is $500. That's the amount of money they get because of their voluntary work from the local organization. So when you come up with a program in a region, when you don't really understand the dynamics of the region, this is what happens. For me, I see this is always sort of a Western tokenistic idea. I mean, thankfully, USAID is doing good, but they really need to understand the topography, how the system works in the region. And eventually what happened? Most of the funds went to existing, what I call denoser NGOs, telling that, we have young people working on youth projects, and the fund again goes to the same old NGOs who's been doing great work. I will not complain, they've been working quite well. But when you say the fund is for young people, below the age of 35, it has to go to them. It cannot be the means to telling that you are not registered, but you need to support them in getting registration at the same time, making sure that some way of avenues to share this money to make sure that they can run their programs. And eventually, the eight selected organization, none were youth-led organization. It was youth-focused organization. So this is the difficulty. So when you come with enough money in an account, you really need to build from the bottom. You cannot just come, hey, we have some money, can we some distribute for young people? No, they have not positioned into receiving any money legally, because whatever law in their respective countries forbid from taking it personally, but rather doing it from an organization point of view. But yes, there are ways to support them in the region. It can be sent through other means, and making sure that it's been the money's usage are in a transparent manner, and it is well spent for the cause it was given for. So what is missing here is not understanding the regional context and undermining sometimes the youth capacity to deliver. And looking at larger picture, we see 90% of the youth-led initiative in the region are social media based. They are not a registered entity end of the day. But those who are registered also still struggle to receive the funds, because point number one, they are not famous enough to receive the money, or the founder or the co-founder is not a social media celebrity. So this puts us in a back foot when we really talk about youth advocacy, youth-led solutions in the region. And unfortunately, it's been continuing. And most of the time, even if we see some funding to some of the organization beyond Gulf, like let's say take example of Jordan or Lebanon or Morocco or Tunisia, there's a very much tokenistic approach, and they receive through their pre-existing connections rather than their credible projects of its own. So that's an overview of the youth role, but also at the same time, why are they not delivering or performing? And comes again accessibility to events and conferences where they really can showcase their project. So I want to jump into another question we have to prompted on why we started Arab Youth for COP. So while we discuss about climate change, we cannot deny the fact is COP, the climate summit or conference of parties, is the biggest space to discuss climate issues or showcase your solutions, showcase your issues, showcase your perspective end of the day to the global audience. Again, a number of young people from the MENA region, especially the Arab region, are very much very, very, very low. I mean, they said, okay, it may change. We have COP coming to MENA region again, to to Egypt last year. And they were celebrating. We have enormous number of young people attending. But sadly, if you look at the numericals, it's just 90% of the young people were from Egypt. They don't count everybody as Arab youth from different countries. So the regional representation was again limited. Now going back to UAE this year, obviously we are having a different system and different sort of ecosystem. Again, young people from the region really don't get a right opportunity. Obviously, the presidency has shown a lot of leniency towards young people's participation, but we don't see the real Arab participation. We didn't see the call for getting young people from the Arab region. It's your COP in the region. You should be here than anybody else. We don't see that sort of urge from any leadership. And that's why last year when we launched Arab Youth for COP, thanks to our supporters who provided funds, we brought 4 young people to COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh. Again, we targeted countries which were most impacted by climate change, and they share their stories. Another thing I wanted to mention is that the duplication work. So some of our colleagues, I mean, I am not against any of my fellow activists from any place. I want to bottom line that. But a couple of our very privileged young people from the global south settled in the West vouch for them, and they get all the support. But the country they are vouching doesn't get anything. This is very, very often seen everywhere. Take it, it's Pakistan, take it, it's Bangladesh, take it, it's Tunisia, Algeria. They're doing great in their country where they've been, and they've been quite known for their work and advocacy for their country, but not being in that country. That goes to many other countries in the region. And what happens with that, the really aspiring young person in that respective country loses an opportunity. He is not represented because he lives in that country, but his fellow guy in a very so-called the open democratic place, he's able to talk anything what he wants, but he's happily engaging with the bigger partners to do sort of social media activism, or at least make noise around issues, which is good. But what is it doing is it makes a young person who is in the respective country lose an opportunity. So what we did was with this program, Arab Youth for COP, was ideally identifying the countries which are least represented and the country which is going through worst impact of climate change. So last year we were able to select one person from Libya, Tunisia, and Palestine, and Jordan to showcase these are the young people who are not very privileged, not connected to bigger, larger NGOs over the years, but have incredible work on the ground for the last many years. And their social media presence is not more than 200 followers, genuine followers, plus a couple of likes. But they are doing great work in the community with the farmers, with beach cleanups, which are sometimes undermined because the opposite side is much mightier. So was the basic understanding why we started Arabic for COP, making sure that this space for climate conversation at a global level, like COPs or Bonn meeting or regional climate weeks, like MENA Climate Week, which happened in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks back, or UNGA in New York every September. So we thought we need to start a program that really showcases a real representation who does work on the ground. And thankfully, our project really showed a great potential last year. Our funders were happy to fund another 6, to be frank. We are sending 10 young people to COP28 in Dubai from Libya, from Algeria, from Tunisia, from a couple of young people from Saudi and also from Bahrain, to really showcase that the young people from the region are really represented based on their merit and the work they've been doing, but not based on their media presence or social space. So we try to build, and we have been and this what is the bigger picture behind is the behind story. So when we announced the COP28 call for application, we had to select 10, and we were overwhelmed with the number of applications we received. We had almost 3,650 applicants for a space of 10, which is enormous, and the application was only for the 22 Arab League countries. And we were overwhelmed with the application, showcasing that how much is the regional. And if you look at other part of the picture, they are those privileged ones like myself who get to go, are being there in that space, and we are the same people who goes back and again, and that means that rest of them really don't get an opportunity, neither funding, neither badges to be there, or neither enough money to stay at the COP. So what we wanted to do is to bridge that gap from the privileged one to a non-privileged one, but bring everybody on board, and especially some of the countries who are least represented and going through worst impacts of climate change. Take it to Libya, or take it to Yemen, take it Syria, Iraq. This, you may find a couple of names to easily quote, but we are looking at the people who really made an impact on the ground. And when you go there, you will find a very limited number of young people. And that's why this program, I think, had shown a bit sort of success, is that the people who share their stories had a great story to say because they lived through it, not somebody saw it on a media and they were talking about them. They're talking about their own stories. So yeah, this is the thing which I wanted to share with you all. And any follow-up question, Rosie, I'm up today.
Sorry, excuse me. I had one follow-up question, Nishad, and it's really fascinating to hear sort of the challenges that are in the space. But it sounds like despite all these restrictions and the restricted civic space, even the risks actually associated with activism, that young people are still engaging in the space. How can we better support them and resource them, particularly on the activism point?
I mean, for me personally, somebody who's following climate activism in the region, including the Gulf countries. I mean, gone are those days when we have been seeing activists, at least beyond human rights. Climate change has got its own space here. Countries started acknowledging, at least since COP in Madrid, that climate change activists are not so deadly dangerous compared to some of the other great issues the countries in the region is facing. So even the government started realizing. I mean, I won't have my own personal experience when calling myself a climate activist was been forbidden, like not to use it. And I was known back then climate educator because I talk about climate change. Today, I'm happy that I've been welcomed by ministers telling activists to the stage. So, you know, the dynamics have changed from a political front, not that climate change, the people got a great space now, but countries in the region realize that climate activism is something where you can use youth as a tokenism, and it also has the image of the governments. So in a negative, but in a positive way, you get that space. So climate activism and activists in many of the countries have been grown. Governments' non-funding support has been also growing. You can see them engaging, for example, COP, or if you're in GA, Bonn meetings, which are intersectional meetings in the UN office in Bonn in June, July. You tend to see more young people coming to national representation, but again, many are not able to make it. It's because fund, and some of the governments don't really have those funds to raise to give to young people. So they say we can support you with access to the space, but we have to find your own funding opportunity to come and share your stories there. So, like you mentioned, space is not that difficult like in the past, at least when I started. But today it has been more accepted because regional countries, especially most oil and gas countries, realize climate change is not just their problem; it's a global problem, and they are doing their part. And this sort of rhetoric within the state medias and the state leaders has brought of a leveling ground for young people to be really on front. And many of the government, of course, for tokenistic approach, invite them for a beach cleanup, conferences as like a youth leader. So obviously this is actually giving some nice, good media attention for them. At the same time, answering your question is giving more space for young people, at least with the name and fame, to be part of such discussion with the government or other non-government organizations in this part of the world.
Wow, that's really positive to hear that the conditions, at least in which you're working, are slowly becoming a little bit more favorable and helpful for the mission that you're hoping to achieve. Last one for me before I open it up to the floor, but we heard quite a few times in the other parts of the series, really the importance of civil society in pushing any type of change and the need to grow that civic space. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the civic space within the youth sort of theme, and what that looks like and how it can be supported to grow?
Exactly. So I also want to correct if I quoted it wrong, but like I mentioned, when this tokenistic approach were all very individual focused. It was not recognizing an organization also. Till date, getting a registration for an association here in the Qatar is close to impossible. I mean, we are lucky enough to get it registered after 2 attempts, which was rejected twice. So that sort of institutionalized organizations are really hard to find. I mean, if people really look into the Gulf countries, there are very few women associations in Bahrain or in Kuwait or in Oman. But when you go into some of the countries, like you see some of these organizations, who may look like very active, but if you go deep into where they are registered, they're part of the government itself. So many of the youth organizations, which is leading climate what we call youth climate space in, for example, UAE this year. It's an entity which is part of the government of UAE. So they are not an independent organization having independent view, rather than their organization part of the government. So this institutional wise, there is very limited space. Individual sorts are supported again, like I said, if you have a good followers, good media persons, they get the chance of being a tokenistic youth there. But institution-wise, many of the organizations are still at the very early stages. Of course, registration is one thing, but registration comes with funding. So if you have funds, you can get registered, because one of the requirement is that having enough funds to get to your bank account. So some of the requirements for us to register here is that you need to have at least a 25K USD in your account to start an NGO. That's a lot of money to start with. How do you get there? Obviously, support of philanthropic organization, local CSR funds from organizations, etc. So this also comes with a lot of burden for young people. Do I really invest something like that and then I cannot deliver? So it puts a lot of pressure on young organization before even they start. And of course, if you want to be really an independent voice, you have to reach out to organizations which are at least not dealing with the fossil fuel industry. I mean, this part of the world, it's mostly fossil fuel industry organization. And I bet you it's easy to get funds from ExxonMobil here than getting from a CSR organization. So they are up with the funds all the time, but you know the purpose of your organization and your passion, what you're fighting for. So it never makes you on the right side of the history if you take funds from organizations who are directly involved with the fossil fuel industry.
Thank you, sir. Definitely well to hear about the link to the word. Okay, I think that's a really helpful introduction to what it's like in the youth and climate space in the region. I'm going to open the floor up to some questions, and I'm sure you've got quite a few percolating. Someone be brave and jump in and kick us off in this session.
Yeah, I can start. So my question is a problem or the challenge is that funders do not want to fund these small organizations who are not active on social media, or they have challenge to find them because they are not that visible?
Both. The one which are active, they are not very active on social media. So the fact is, first one, I mean, if you're active on social media, it's easy to find. So even the philanthropy organization who looks for, or other associations who want to support, they just do a Google engineering and they just find 2 or 3 existing ones who are doing youth programs than youth organization itself. The basic fact is most of the organization really doesn't have social presence. I mean, I can easily name people from Jordan or in Bahrain, even ourselves. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to be well networked for the last 4 years. Many of these organizations are just sprouting out recently. At least for me, half of the organization in Egypt was sprouted just before COP27. How do they survive after COP? I know half of them even died off after COP27 because there was a lot of push for youth, and the Egyptian side, they were really sort of at least show off to have a lot of youth civil society organization. But they died off. I mean, this is the same story. Now it's happening in UAE, but 99% of the organization, if you see in UAE youth organization, are just a social media organization. They don't have credibility or as an institutional organization. And these are all like just what you see as a has a hippie thing. It's a COP happening. Hey, let's start an organization. They started, the students at the college, and they just drop it after they find there is no much support coming out. So what happens is that the visibility comes with the credible work, but you cannot find them. Just jumping into that, that's another reason we are starting a Youth Climate Action platform to showcase this project. It came out of the mind. So we started this project. We'll be launching at COP28 in Dubai. There's a new platform to showcase every credible organization working on credible project. And of course, we'll be showcasing activists also, academics also. So we'll have filtering out from each country who's working on what, and is this organization legit, registered or non-registered? Is it just a social media platform? Everything will be filtered out. So we're working on establishing this platform to address some of the things you just asked. Is it visibility is just because they don't have a great social media space? Yes. So how do we do? It's to do something like this, to give them a space where somebody from the West comes, hey, I'm looking for an organization in Jordan for young people below 23 working on some incredible local projects. So you go here, you do use the filter, you really find those organizations. So yeah, I will stop there.
And now, thank you very much, Rani, for starting us off. And I see that you posted your question in the chat, which is brilliant. And we have a question as well from Matebele. And I don't know if you're here, Matebele, or if we've lost you, but I don't know if you wanted to read out your question. Oh, I can do it. Great. And Matebele says, any opportunities for a young, dependable community builder like me from South Africa? Would love to lend a helping hand, however, or any kind of opportunities to stretch. This is a young person talking about really valuing the importance of acting on climate and also the importance of employment. Thank you very much, Matebele. And then we've got Richard here saying, how much time do you have for outreach to schools and universities, establishing partnerships, and perhaps jointly sourcing funding opportunities?
Well, with schools and university, the engagements are very great, but not in terms of funding. Why? Because university CSR would like to do their own stuff. I mean, green stuff at university and schools are not new to any part of the world. Even in the Middle East, schools are very active in those fronts. But working with independent organizations, youth organizations, it's even difficult for them to build sort of an official MOU. But we do have a couple of schools that have been working closely with us. But again, these are dependent because they don't have a separate CSR funding to build partnership. Most of the partnership are non-revenue funding. Like, we work with Qatar Academy, where we work with empowering young people. We do a couple of workshops to empower students. But these are like non-monetary partnership and MOUs. And that sort of happens quite heavily in this part of the world. Everybody's happy to jump into those sort of MOUs. But if you look at really building partnership where we can get some source of funding, where we can really deliver sort of programs exclusive for schools, they're very limited.
I don't know if you wanted to follow up, Richard.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, thanks, Razeen. Thanks, Nishad. This is really interesting, intriguing. Yeah, lots to learn here. I'm sort of taking notes as you're talking. I wonder, from the public sector, I can understand your point with regards to funding. Is there an opportunity partnering with schools and universities from the private sector, from maybe private philanthropists, maybe parents of students who might be interested in supporting that? Is there? Yeah, perhaps I should have mentioned that in the chat. So maybe from the public side, I can understand that. Is there an opportunity or not, perhaps, from the private side?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, some of the rich parents are always offering us help. I mean, that's how we even survived over the years. There were times when our organization only had the fund to pay the bills to keep the organization alive, and it really came from the students and the members. Obviously, membership for young people were always taken care by the parents, so that was the membership fee basically. But even if you look at philanthropy from a point of climate, the region, especially for us in the Gulf countries, we are not yet there. I mean, you find a lot of things happening in UAE this year, but this comes with a backdrop. They're having COP28. The government announces the year of sustainability. So everybody is like, let's greenwash this as much as possible. So that sort of tendency, which will superly decline to zero immediately in January or February. And this is quite common. I mean, I was so young, I don't remember. The same happened here in Qatar when they hosted COP18 back in 2012, where youth movement were not even part of the discussion. So this is quite evident. I mean, why should I go back to Doha? And let's imagine what happened in Egypt. Similar story. The whole green discussion, everyone was at heights ahead of COP. It was at super heights during COP, and then after COP, everything gone. Even many of the organizations who had some funds supporting before completely didn't have any more funds to provide after them. So that sort of things still prevail here. And again, individual funding, don't see climate and environment and youth movement is something they really want to fund. Unlike in the West, it's quite evident, and you can see many of the rich philanthropic family would really put that money for aspiring youth organizations in their part of the world.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I had another question. Sorry, I'm being greedy
You're
with
not.
questions.
You're
Is that
not being
okay,
greedy
Razeen?
with questions, Richard. It's totally okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, question number two, Nishad, and anyone else on the call. So partnering with influencers. I can understand the requirement for having a social media presence, and many of the organizations that you work with do not have a social media presence, which I can understand is a big challenge, particularly in the MENA region. Is there opportunities, or have you considered opportunities, or would you suggest not partnering with influencers, for example, on generating climate activism, generating climate support for philanthropy? I'm asking with a bit of knowledge, considerable knowledge. Nishad, I was in the Middle East for 15 years. I worked in the Gulf, and I worked for a decade or more in Lebanon. My experience working with influencers in Lebanon was with a private school where we were trying to raise awareness around the private school, trying to raise awareness for it was a marketing purpose where we were bringing in different new students into the school, but also promoting some of our other activities, which included climate activities, and we partnered with some local and international organizations. And I wondered, and there it was relatively successful partnering with influencers. There was some alumni of the school who were influencers. In fact, bizarrely, the top five out of the top 10 influencers in Lebanon, we did a study. They were all alumni of the private school that I was working at. Somehow, it was just bizarre coincidence, and so we were able to tap into alumni of the school who expanded our social media presence. Is that something that you'd recommend with regards to your projects, or not so much?
I mean, again, depends. We recently had again one of very known chef from Lebanon, Chef Laila. We're also very choosy when it comes to who we want to promote to social media influencers, because they influence everything. I mean, they will be hosting an event for corporate greenwashing events. They've been attending oil and gas events. So we've been particular who really want to. And again, like some of the thing mentioned, we have reached out for pulling out crowd to attend our events. Like we did the local conference of youth recently, which brought a good attention. But this sort of engagement is just pulling numbers, but this doesn't offer us any sort of monetary benefits. Or, hey, we saw you through Hamad al-Khabari speaking about you. How do you guys operate? What's the source of income? Nobody does that. Like, hey, there's a conference happening, let's all go. So it attracts crowd to us about an event if they talks about or share on the social media. But the real dynamics around raising funds thing really doesn't happen. And of course, this is because people see influencers in a way to attract masses, but not really bringing a considerable amount of funding if it is. So that's what we're looking for. So it works, but yeah, I don't think so. It has been working in raising funds to a great extent.
All right. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Interesting.
Thanks very much, Richard. Very interesting to hear about the model as well, actually. Richard, I wanted to ask you, I mean, one thing that I'm hearing from what you've said is it is very difficult to get funding to activists on the ground unless they are sort of an incorporated organization. Are there mechanisms that exist to help funders be able to fund in a different way, non-incorporated organizations, but still maintain the rules that they have to stick with, right? Like in the UK, sometimes you have to fund a registered charity. In the US, it's 501. It's right, you understand. So are there mechanisms that can help a funder bridge that gap?
I mean, this is the model we really want to try, is that micro-granting, where the main young youth organization, which is registered, receives the fund, which channelized to a local organization by partnering. So what we've been doing to Arab Youth for COP is the same way. I mean, we not only do funds them, we also making sure they get the per diem and stuff. And we receive the funds and it goes micro grants to them. And when we disseminate the monies to the respective selected youths. I mean, this can be a good route to do it, because if you start looking only for youth organizations which are registered and only they can accept sort of funding, you may not find many, and that makes it half of the youth organization, or more than 70 or 80% of the youth organization really not receiving funds. So the idea of microfinancing through a main fund receiving, obviously, hopefully, and again, this is not going to the same denominator NGO telling that you distribute it, rather than goes to the credible who has shown quite years of work with youth and youth advocacy, goes to the organization which is completely led and run by young people, and reach out to them, and through them you can do it. I mean, Arab Youth for COPs, we're doing exactly the same. We're receiving funds from credible bodies. We heard in the past many tried, but they cannot receive funds because they are not legit organization in their respective country. What we were doing is we are acting on behalf of those other organizations and telling that if you are from this organization, supports you by bringing sort of funds for your participation, and some funds even last year were distributed to organize a local conference of youth in their respective country. So that's where how we even motivated them to do local activities more, bring more young people. So that sort of micro branding can really help, where you really identify the real change making organization regionally, and they look into them because they know the region, they know the organization who are credibly working or incredibly working, and work with them. And that sort of will be really bridging this gap of not reaching out to the real youth organization on the ground.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that you started an initiative around that. I don't know if I heard that correctly. What is that called?
The Arab Youth for COP. It receives the funds.
The Arab Youth for COP.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it just to support young people to go to COP, or is it to support their other activities as well?
So the idea is to basically first of all, it's not just a funding mechanism, it's basically a capacity building. So we have trainings which is ongoing on climate negotiation, COPs, history. We have some of the negotiators training them. We have media training them with some of them who has been writing around COPs for years, both in English and Arabic and French. So also at the same time, we are building leadership capacity for young people. So training them to be the real, not just an attendant, come back, sort of, it's an opportunity to go to Dubai now. There's opportunity to represent your community there. You will be their voices. So we train them. So we always say this program is not a funding program. It's basically a capacity building program for the most underprivileged young people from their respective countries in the Arab League countries. Get into the spaces, showcase your stories, rather than third person speaking on your behalf. You speak your experiences and your great work you've been doing home, and also trying to get them as many as speaking slots. So we're also working on getting maximum speaking slots for them to really, share their stories. We're also talking to media to get them covered, so that in a way that, you generate that sort of space where young people who someone asked the question, how do you make their presence known through this way? So like I said, the platform will help, but you have to reach out to the platform. But a big platform like COP or BONE or New York Climate other meetings are the spaces where you can really get in one notch, you get everybody out there. So that's sort of the idea why through Arab Youth for COP, we are trying to do something similar, where we not only build capacity, but give them a platform to really shine and showcase what they've been doing. And who knows, that may help their organization through other partners to meet at these great spaces, and that help their organization to move from nobody known to somebody they know now because they know their stories.
Thank you, and for putting a much more holistic picture on it than I did as well. We've got a point from Rani. Thank you, Rani. And you said, doesn't fiscal sponsorship solve this challenge? I think you were talking about how we might bridge the gap. Would you like to say a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So you talked about that, like some initiatives may not be have an incorporated organization, so they don't have a legal structure. So doesn't fiscal sponsorship solve this problem? like a group of people can like partner with a registered nonprofit in order to get the fundings.
Yeah, this is possible. That's why I was telling like how we partner. So whomever young people we select our program, it's also getting grants from us to organize local events where they say they're partnering with us. So they receive the funds through us. That's, I mean, I don't know what the right word was, micro granting or something, but I think it was granting goes through the main organization who decides where to go and to whom to be selected, rather than somebody, I mean, beg your pardon if I'm wrong, somebody sitting at DC or somebody sitting in Far West decides that, hey, I just saw this organization online. I think we should fund them because they put up a great presentation to us. But rather, like you go to an organization who locally understand the concerns and the way we can deal it. I mean, again, dealing with this also not easy. Like example, the MENA youth we selected last year had a difficulty to come even out of MENA. So we had to work along ways to get the money there. I mean, do you think an organization like, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to name or shame anybody, would really put those sort of efforts to make sure that, because there was a thing like, let's drop her, we will find somebody else representing Yemen. But we thought a country like Yemen really need voice. So we pulled out all our strings to make sure that Yemeni representative was able to come and the funds was received in Yemen. And it had to take a lot of routes. But that's the beauty thing of when you're working with that local initiative or regional organization which has that outreach.
Thank you, Nishad and Ronnie as well. And we had a question from Natasha saying, I'd love to hear which youth organizations within the region are working on holding companies accountable and are through their work challenging and trying to change destructive corporations.
I mean, far close none, if I should say. Obviously, it comes with the backdrop. Most of such corporates are anyway, bigger ones comes from the West. The rest are regionally state-led organizations. So out of safety, we don't indulge into something very westernized idea of making corporates accountable exclusively. But at international spaces, they try to or tend to do it because it's more safer to do in such a space. So when you talk about local organizations, we are limited other than the oil and gas industries. There are none we can name. I mean, the rest you name from Unilever to, I don't know, any other corporate, bigger corporate. They're there elsewhere else too. So regional ones are very limited, family-owned companies with not that great influence, at least globally, but at least in the country level, they might, or regional level. So, but yeah, I have not personally known anybody doing that exclusively, but this is sort of some acts we definitely does at COP with naming and shaming companies which have been far away from the realities of climate change or not supporting climate action or any of ESG within their system.
Thank you, Nishad. And I'm going to leave space for 30 seconds, see if there are any final questions before I put our last question to Nishad. See if there's anyone who had any burning last questions that they wanted to put to him. Nishad, our last question that we put to every one of our speakers is, oh, Mohammed, I see you've come off of, you've come onto camera. I don't know if that's because you wanted to ask a question. If you do, you have the floor. Okay. Yeah, so the last question that we asked every one of our speakers was, if you had $1 million to be specific in philanthropic funding, what would you do with it?
Well, I think I have pitched enough to say this. Been to many of the events where they bring up this hypothetically what you will do.
Really?
I mean,
Yes.
my answer always was this. There are tons of organizations waiting to receive these grants. And they have their capability, they have their projects. Even some are dead, but this will be rekindled when they get the funds. And I think $1 million is even small if I look at the MENA organization. I guarantee if that funds comes in, it will be spent within the span of 3 months to all the organization that's needy and credible enough to receive, and those organizations which are led by young people below the age of 35. So that's the thing. And most of the funds will be going to running and operating and help register some of the organizations which don't have the capacity to do so. So basically, it will go on first funds goes to supporting organization how to register their respective organization with legal support in the respective countries and get a sort of seed funds to kickstart their programs in their countries, and some funds they kept for their operational things, that because if they don't receive their own funds over the time, so they don't collapse. So it is too low even for, under at least my understanding. If I had been asked to put a proposal for MENA youth funding, it should be nothing below $10 million.
I think that's a really great point to close on. Essentially, 1 million is not enough for what the space needs, and 1 million can get us started. But if we really want to ramp up, don't come with less than 10 million. Impatience Earth. Okay. Thank you ever so much, Nishad. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you, and I, for one, have come away with a new understanding of the realities within the MENA region that I just didn't have, particularly around young people. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm going to all our participants, I'm going to allow you to say thank you to Nishad and allow you to let him go, but I will ask you to please stay on the call for just a moment so that we can talk about how brilliant he is and what we learned. So thank you very much, Nishad, for sharing your mind with us today.
Thank you for your patience and also staying with me. I hope I didn't bore you, but happy I brought the realities of the region, which I think we should have been doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we hope we can go some way towards supporting your work. Thank you, Nishad. Bye.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you. And also I want to thank Aditi, who reached out to me. So thanks to Aditi, who is fortunately not able to join because of his holidays, if I believe. So thanks to Aditi also, and thanks, Rosie, for being a great host.
You're very welcome. I'll pass on to Aditi as well.
Thank you.